3. Build peaks. 1. You are a sophomore at Hillsdale High School, a public school in San Mateo, California. In your history class, you've been studying the rise of fascism, World War II, and the Holocaust. Meanwhile, in English, you're reading William Golding's Lord of the Flies, which tells the story of a group of boys who are marooned on an island. Detached from the stabilizing influences of society and culture, they revert to a state of savagery. Golding said that he wrote the novel partly as a reaction to the brutality he observed during his service in World War II. The book was his attempt to trace the defects of society back to the defects of human nature. One day in English, your class is discussing a part of the novel where violence breaks out among the boys, but then the conversation is interrupted. To your surprise, you're handed an official-looking legal complaint. See below. The document announces that William Golding has been accused of libel for grossly misrepresenting human nature in his portrayal of the boys. You and your classmates will conduct Golding's trial. Each of you will choose a role: witness, attorney, or judge. The trial will hinge on big, provocative questions. Was Golding right that human nature is defective? Is civilization just a veneer over a violent core? This event takes place every year for sophomores at Hillsdale High and has become known as the Trial of Human Nature, or the Golding Trial. You and your classmates will have about 2 months to prepare. Then, when the day comes, you'll ride a school bus to an actual courtroom and conduct the trial in front of a jury made up of Hillsdale teachers and alumni. A gallery full of your peers and parents will watch the action. As one of the attorneys, you will call famous witnesses from history and literature, people who have a strong opinion about the true nature of humanity, good or bad. Some predictable figures will take the stand, such as Hitler, Hobbes, Gandhi, and Mother Teresa, but the witnesses will also include some surprises: Jane Goodall, Mark Twain, Darth Vader, and even Tupac Shakur. All of them will be impersonated, in costume, by your fellow students, who will have diligently researched and rehearsed their testimonies on the question of human nature. Over the years, many juries have convicted Golding. Many have freed him. It's up to you what will happen this time. The Trial of Human Nature was created in 1989 by Greg Jurels, a social studies teacher in his 3rd year, and Susan Bedford, an English teacher with 20 years of experience. They didn't know each other well until the time their students complained that both teachers had picked the same due date for a major assignment. That got them talking, and they realized they had a lot in common. For one thing, both had grown disillusioned with teaching and were struggling with whether they wanted to continue. I had fallen into the English teacher's rut of read a novel, talk about it, take a test. Bedford said, I was looking for something that would reignite the spark that I felt at the beginning of my career. They also craved something for their students, and as they talked, they came to a disturbing realization. Even though high school students log more time in the classroom than anywhere else, their most memorable experiences rarely take place there. Instead, they remember prom, football games, musical productions, student body elections, swim meets, talent shows. Jurels and Bedford then asked themselves a question that would guide the rest of their careers. What if we could design an academic experience that was as memorable as prom? Think about that question. They wanted to build a peak moment, one as memorable as prom, the night when teenagers rent stretch limos and vomit on each other. That's a tall order. They also wanted the experience to draw on some of the great themes of their courses, including a basic mystery they share. What is humanity's true nature? Inspiration struck when Jurels came across an account of someone conducting a mock trial of Cain, the son of Adam and Eve, who killed his brother Abel. In the Bible, Cain is the first person who is born and also the first murderer, which is its own comment on human nature. The mock trial format seemed perfect. It would be different, dramatic, and unpredictable. We purposely tried to think about ways to up the ante, said Bedford. To give the experience more challenge, more value, to ask kids to stretch themselves in ways that virtually all of them had never stretched themselves before. In the first year of the trial, they raised the stakes by inviting the principal of the school and the captain of the football team, among other Hillsdale celebrities, to join the jury. They wanted their students to feel the challenge of performing in front of the school's power players. As the weeks of preparation unfolded, Jules and Bedford felt some pressure of their own. If they failed, they would fail with the principal observing firsthand. We were going through the same things the kids were going through, said Bedford. I would never have said I'm a risk taker. Their confidence grew as they saw how seriously the students were taking their tasks. There was intensity and excitement and engagement, Jules said, and extra work that we never asked for. Kids were coming in after school to do more. The students never asked, "How many points is this worth?" said Bedford, incredulous. That's always the first question out of kids' mouths, but they never asked it. We thought, whoa, we've hooked into something powerful. In its first year, the trial was far from smooth. Some witnesses were brilliant, others woefully underprepared, and others shaken by nerves. But the spectacle was unforgettable. Witnesses taking their place in a genuine Superior Court witness stand. Student attorneys, wearing suits, making oral arguments in front of an audience. Observers watching a cross-examination of Gandhi. It was extraordinary. When the verdict came down not guilty, the kids burst into cheers and applause. After the trial, Jules watched a student who had never shown much interest in the classroom, bounding down the hall like he'd just hit a game-winning shot. He said, "That was great. What are we going to do next?" Since then, the trial of human nature has become an institution at Hillsdale High. The fall of 2017 will see the 29th consecutive run. Bedford and Jules succeeded at creating an academic event as memorable as senior prom. In fact, even more memorable. As Jules said, with no little pride, "In every graduation speech I've heard, the trial has been mentioned. I've never heard prom mentioned." The spirit of the trial was contagious. A group of other teachers at Hillsdale High got sick of hearing their senior class students, year after year, reminisce about how memorable the trial was. A bit of professional jealousy kicked in. They wanted their own peak experiences for seniors. So they created the Senior Exhibition, which challenged students to design their own research project, develop it over the course of the year, and then prepare for a final, oral defense of their work in the spring. Topics ranged from magical realism to anorexia to the future of nuclear fusion. Many parents attended the oral defense sessions. Their pride was obvious. "I think it's very rare for parents to see their students' work," said Jeff Gilbert, one of the creators of the Senior Exhibition and now the principal of Hillsdale High. They see swim meets. They see dance performances. They see plays. But it's very rare for parents to see the academic work their kids do. "School needs to be so much more like sports," he added. "In sports, there's a game, and it's in front of an audience. We run school like it is non-stop practice. You never get a game. Nobody would go out for the basketball team if you never had a game. What is the game for the students?" Note that this isn't costless. The time and energy invested in the trial of human nature had to come from somewhere. Jules and Bedford sacrificed some of their free time, and it's likely they invested somewhat less time in other lessons in order to focus on the trial. Is this sacrifice worth it? Almost certainly yes. Recall the mantra about great service experiences from the first chapter, mostly forgettable and occasionally remarkable. That mantra applies to school experience and life experience as well. The occasionally remarkable moments shouldn't be left to chance. They should be planned for, invested in. They are peaks that should be built. And if we fail to do that, look at what we're left with. Mostly forgettable. There are more than 35,000 high schools in the United States. How many of them have even one academic experience that compares with the trial of human nature? Our high schools, which were excellent public schools, certainly didn't. Did yours? 2. While mostly forgettable experiences are disappointing in school and in our personal lives, they can look quite different in the business world. Here's hoping that your experiences are mostly forgettable with companies that provide you with power, water, cable, internet, shipping, gasoline, plumbing, and dental care. That would be a success, wouldn't it? Because in many customer relationships, the moments most likely to be remembered are pits. The cable goes out. The toilet backs up. The hygienist flosses you a little too vigorously. In other words, mostly forgettable is actually a desirable state in many businesses. It means nothing went wrong. You got what you expected. Think of it as the first stage of a successful customer experience. First, you fill the pits. That, in turn, frees you up to focus on the second stage, creating the moments that will make the experience occasionally remarkable. Fill pits, then build peaks. What's striking, though, is that many business leaders never pivot to that second stage. Instead, having filled the pits in their service, they scramble to pave the potholes, the minor problems and annoyances. It's as though the leaders aspire to create a complaint-free service rather than an extraordinary one. Take the Magic Castle Hotel as an example. If the hotel lacked hot water, that would be a pit, and until it was filled, guests would not be charmed by the popsicles. In the hotel industry, delighting your guests is an unattainable goal until you provide the basics: reasonably quick check-in, reasonably attractive rooms, reasonably comfortable beds, and so on. But some customers are still going to complain. The lamp wasn't bright enough. You didn't have HBO. There were no gluten-free Pop-Tarts on the snack menu. In service businesses, there are a huge number of potholes to fix, and that's why executives can get trapped in an endless cycle of complaint management. They're always playing defense and never offense. The Magic Castle leaders play offense. They don't try to make everything perfect. The lobby is vaguely reminiscent of an auto service shop waiting area. But they nail the moments that stay with you. General Manager Darren Ross is always encouraging employees to go for the moments that make a customer's jaw drop. In one case, a couple came back to the hotel one night, raving to a staffer about a cocktail they'd had at a local bar. The next day, after they returned to their room from sightseeing, they were astonished by the gift that was waiting for them. The staffer had tracked down the cocktail recipe from the bar and bought all the ingredients so they could make their own. That's what playing offense looks like. See the endnotes for one exception to this logic. Research suggests that when customers contact you because they've had problems with your product or service, you should focus on defense, that is, you should focus on efficiency and not try to delight them. Studies have consistently shown that reliability, dependability, and competence meet customer expectations, said service expert Leonard Berry, a professor at Texas A&M University. To exceed customer expectations and create a memorable experience, you need the behavioral and interpersonal parts of the service. You need the element of pleasant surprise. And that comes when human beings interact. Here's the surprise, though. Most service executives are ignoring the research about meeting versus exceeding expectations. The customer experience researchers at Forrester, a leading research and advisory firm, conduct an annual survey of more than 120,000 customers about their most recent experience with companies from a wide range of industries: banks, hotels, automakers, PC manufacturers, and more. One question in a recent survey: the U.S. Customer Experience Index, CX Index, 2016, asked how the customers felt about that experience. They rated their emotions on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 reflected a very bad feeling and 7 a very good one. If you were a service executive, what would you do with the results of this survey question? Southwest Airlines and Intuit, and ask them which plan better described the way their company allocated its time and resources. They estimated, on average, that their companies spent 80% of their resources trying to improve the experience of seriously unhappy customers. That seems reasonable at first glance. They're trying to eliminate the worst customer problems. But as a strategic investment, it's madness. Here's why. Forrester's researchers have built models of the financial value of a customer. They know from survey responses, for instance, that an airline customer who gives a 7 very positive rating will spend about $2,200 on air travel over the next year. A customer giving a 4 rating, on the other hand, will spend only $800. The equivalent figures for the package shipping industry are $57 and $24. In other words, the happiest people in any industry tend to spend more, so moving a 4 to a 7 generates more additional spending than moving a 1 to a 4. Furthermore, there are dramatically more people in the feeling positive 4 to 6 zone than in the feeling negative 1 to 3 zone. So, with Plan B, you're creating more financial value per person and reaching more people at the same time. As a result, choosing between Plan A and Plan B is not a close call. Here's the astonishing finding from the Forrester data. If you elevate the positives, Plan B, you'll earn about 9 times more revenue than if you eliminate the negatives, Plan A. 8.8 times, to be precise. Yet most executives are pursuing Plan A. See the footnote for more on the methodology and an anticipated quibble. 2-inch. How can leaders prioritize so poorly when so much money is at stake? The truth is that we should empathize with them because we all make the same mistake in different areas of life. Research has shown, again and again, that we tend to obsess about problems and negative information. Sports fans think more about the games their teams lost than those they won. In our diaries, we spend more time reflecting on the bad things that happened than the good. Negative feedback packs a heavier punch than positive. We obsess about one negative comment in a collection of 10 supportive ones. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania summarized dozens of studies that pitted negative information against positive. Their conclusion was right in the title of the paper: bad is stronger than good. So, when it comes to the way service executives think, it's not surprising that bad is stronger than good. Their attention is naturally drawn to the customers who had the worst experiences. But in indulging that instinct, they miss an enormous opportunity. To be clear, we're not recommending that leaders abandon their efforts to fix big problems. Rather, they should reallocate their attention. There's 9 times more to gain by elevating positive customers than by eliminating negative ones. And that process of elevation of moving customers to 7 is not about filling pits or paving potholes. To create fans, you need the remarkable, and that requires peaks. Peaks don't emerge naturally. They must be built 3. How do you build peaks? You create a positive moment with elements of elevation, insight, pride, and/or connection. We'll explore those final 3 elements later, but for now, let's focus on elevation. To elevate a moment, do 3 things. First, boost sensory appeal. Second, raise the stakes. Third, break the script. Breaking the script means to violate expectations about an experience. The next chapter is devoted to the concept. Moments of elevation need not have all 3 elements, but most have at least 2. Boosting sensory appeal is about turning up the volume on reality. Things look better or taste better or sound better or feel better than they usually do. Weddings have flowers and food and music and dancing. And they need not be super expensive. See the footnote for more. Point 4. the Popsicle Hotline offers sweet treats delivered on silver trays by white-gloved waiters. The trial of human nature is conducted in a real courtroom. It's amazing how many times people actually wear different clothes to peak events, graduation robes and wedding dresses and home team colors. At Hillsdale High, the lawyers wore suits and the witnesses came in costume. A peak means something special is happening. It should look different. To raise the stakes is to add an element of productive pressure, a competition, a game, a performance, a deadline, a public commitment. Consider the pre-game jitters at a basketball game, or the sweaty hands thrill of taking the stage at signing day, or the pressure of the oral defense at Hillsdale High's senior exhibition. Remember how the teacher Susan Bedford said that, in designing the trial, she and Greg Jules were deliberately trying to up the ante for their students. They made their students conduct the trial in front of a jury that included the principal and varsity quarterback. That's pressure. One simple diagnostic to gauge whether you've transcended the ordinary is if people feel the need to pull out their cameras. If they take pictures, it must be a special occasion. Not counting the selfie addict who thinks his face is a special occasion. Our instinct to capture a moment says, I want to remember this. That's a moment of elevation. What lessens a moment are the opposite instincts, diminishing the sensory appeal or lowering the stakes. Imagine the things an unenlightened boss might say. Why, yes, serving popsicles to guests is a delightful idea, but honestly, it's just not practical to staff a hotline all day, so why don't we store them in a self-serve freezer near the ice machine? Is it really necessary to render a verdict in the trial of human nature? Shouldn't both sides come out feeling like winners? Yes, signing day is a terrific tradition, but we have so many students. What if we just printed their college choices in a program so we can make time for an inspirational graduation speaker? Beware the soul-sucking force of reasonableness. Otherwise, you risk deflating your peaks. Speed bumps are reasonable. Mount Everest is not reasonable. At this point, our guess is that you like the idea of introducing more peaks in your life or work. You get it, but you may be vastly underestimating the difficulty of making it happen. The concept is simple, but the execution is hard. One reason it's hard is that it's usually no one's job to create a peak. Jules and Bedford were required to teach English and history. They were required to grade their students' essays and exams. But the trial was purely optional, and to make it happen, they had to surmount countless annoying logistical and political hurdles. Consider just one. Imagine what it would take to arrange school buses to haul students across town at a non-standard time to a real courtroom, especially when there is no line item in the budget for such an expedition. It would have been so easy for reasonableness to come creeping in. As another example, remember John Deere's first day experience? The program is a no-brainer, right? You may have imagined that it's been rolled out worldwide. It hasn't. Implementation has been spotty. Lonnie Lorenz Fry's team, which created the experience, is part of an internal branding group. Her group designed the experience, but it didn't control the rollout. That was left to individual John Deere offices across Asia. While in some places, such as India and Beijing, the experience has been adopted enthusiastically, in others it has been ignored altogether.
Why?
It's no one's job, and it's a hassle, and there's always something happening that seems more urgent. This same dynamic is what makes it so hard to create peaks in our personal lives as well. Imagine that you and a good friend have always dreamed of seeing the Northern Lights. It is a bucket list thing for both of you. You've even pinpointed a specific place in Yukon, Canada that would be the perfect spot to see them. What if you called that friend right now and tried to make the trip happen? You probably have a sense of what would follow. First, 3 weeks of phone tag. Then, initial enthusiasm. We should totally do that. followed by a return to normal life. Concerns about getting time off from work. Difficulty aligning calendars. What about the kids' school schedules? Money issues. Guilt about excluding partners should they come? Sure. Okay, now there are 4 calendars to align and new babysitting issues. The conclusion: maybe we'll try again next year? We're not trying to pop your balloon. Rather, we want to build your determination. It's going to be way harder than you think to create peaks. But once you've done it, you're going to consider every ounce of effort worth it. You will have created your own defining moments. 4. Eugene O'Kelly devotes his moving memoir, Chasing Daylight, to making sense of an extraordinary statement that begins the book. I was blessed. I was told I had 3 months to live. In the last week of May 2005, O'Kelly's doctors told him that he suffered from the rare cancer glioblastoma multiforme. 3 malignant tumors, the size of golf balls, had grown in his brain, and there was no cure. At the time, O'Kelly was 53 years old, the CEO of KPMG, the $4 billion, 20,000 employee accounting firm. He had a wife, Corinne, and 2 daughters. His younger daughter, Gina, 14, was still in school awaiting the summer break. Gina would likely go back to school in the fall without a father. All the plans that Corinne and I had made for our future had to be junked, he said. The quicker I scrapped plans for a life that no longer existed, the better. I needed to come up with new goals. Fast. On June 8th, 2 weeks after the diagnosis, he stepped down as the leader of KPMG. Then he did what came naturally. He made a plan. What can I say? I was an accountant not only by trade but manner as well. I did not know how to do anything unplanned, dying included. One night at his dining room table, he drew 5 concentric circles. It was a map of his relationships. His family was in the center circle, and in the outer ring were more distant relationships, such as business partners. He resolved to unwind his relationships to beautifully resolve that man to work systematically from the outer circle toward the middle. He reasoned that as his disease progressed, he'd want more uninterrupted time with the people who were closest, especially his family. He kept the first unwinding simple a phone call or an email exchange, sharing memories or mutual appreciations. He was careful not to let the conversations grow too sad or morbid. He wanted them to be special. The 3rd and 4th circles were composed of closer friends and colleagues, and he met with them in person. O'Kelly wanted their encounters to be full of pleasure and pleasures. Sometimes they shared an exquisite meal. Other times, they met in a beautiful place, sitting at a park bench by the water or strolling through Central Park, boosting sensory appeal in an atmosphere of heightened stakes. In these unwindings, O'Kelly and his friends swapped stories and talked about life. He expressed gratitude for their friendship. He came to think of these peaks as perfect moments, and his mission, as he saw it, was to create as many of them as he could in his dwindling time. As the summer went on, he began to spend more time with his closest friends and family. He had moved to the center circle. He said goodbye to his sisters Rose and Linda, and then in August, he and Corinne and Gina went to stay at their second home in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. By then, O'Kelly had endured a regimen of radiation intended to shrink his tumors and earn him a few more weeks of life. He was very weak. In late August, his mother and brother flew to Tahoe for the weekend. It would be their final unwinding visit. On Sunday, which was a beautiful day, they took a boat out onto the lake. O'Kelly wrote, "After we were out there a while, I took my mother's hand and walked her to the front of the boat to talk, just the 2 of us. I told her I was in a good place. I told her I would see her in heaven. A person of deep faith, she was comfortable with that. It was a perfect day. I felt complete. Spent but complete." The evening after his mother and brother left, Corinne lay in his arms on the couch. She sensed that he was starting to go and commented on his absence. He said, "You're going to have to take over now. I've done all I can do." About 2 weeks later, on September 10th, 2005, O'Kelly died of a pulmonary embolism. What O'Kelly realized, in the shadow of his final days, was the extraordinary power of a moment. He wrote, "I experienced more perfect moments and perfect days in 2 weeks than I had in the last 5 years, or than I probably would have in the next 5 years had my life continued the way it was going before my diagnosis." Look at your own calendar. Do you see perfect days ahead? Or could they be hidden and you have to find a way to unlock them? If I told you to aim to create 30 perfect days, could you? How long would it take? 30 days? 6 months? 10 years? Never? I felt like I was living a week in a day, a month in a week, a year in a month. Now, take a second look at the beginning of O'Kelly's memoir, especially those final 2 words. I was blessed. I was told I had 3 months to live. That opportunity to live was why he felt blessed. Shouldn't we share his zeal for moments that matter? We may have more time to live than he did, but should that be a reason to put them off? This is the great trap of life. One day rolls into the next, and a year goes by, and we still haven't had that conversation we always meant to have. Still haven't created that peak moment for our students. Still haven't seen the northern lights. We walk a flat land that could have been a mountain range. It's not easy to snap out of this tendency. It took a terminal illness for Gene O'Kelly to do it. What would it take to motivate you to create a perfect moment? We should note that Jules and Bedford were both extremely generous in sharing credit. With others, both of them credited a supportive principal and school environment, and both cited a long list of intellectual influences on their work. It was our decision to keep the story focused on them for simplicity's sake. One methodology. This data was drawn from an analysis of 16 industries: airlines, automotive manufacturers, auto and home insurance, retail banks, direct banks, car rental, credit cards, health insurance, hotels, PC manufacturers, parcel shipping/delivery, traditional retail, online-only retail, internet service providers, TV service providers, and wireless providers. Although there were differences across the industries, of course, the fundamental pattern we're citing was consistent. 2. The anticipated quibble. You might be thinking, what about the negative word of mouth that might be spread by your unsatisfied customers if you don't spend your time focusing on them? Forrester measured that effect and found that customers discouraging others from the brand was incredibly rare. The negative word of mouth effect was so minimal, in fact, that they eventually eliminated it from the model. We should add that, as we got to know Forrester's team, we realized we shared a similar perspective, and we've begun to explore a consulting partnership with them that would help companies deliver better customer experiences. At press time, the partnership was not formalized, but we're intrigued by the idea of helping clients build peaks. Boosting sensory appeal doesn't require extravagance. Money can easily be misspent. When researchers at Emory University surveyed 3,000 people about their weddings, they found that more expensive weddings were correlated with a higher chance of divorce. That's not a statement of causation, so if you're planning a wedding, don't worry that you're endangering your marriage by splurging on flowers. But the results are a good reminder to focus on meaning rather than money. If you imagine a $1,000 wedding versus a $30,000 wedding, for instance, which one is more likely to take place in a personally meaningful, emotion-heavy location rather than a pretty but generic banquet hall? Which one is likely to feel handmade rather than